Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. Do not ask who I am, and do not ask me to remain the same. More than one person, doubtless like me, writes in order to have no face. Michel Foucault. See, we believe here at Culture Matters that people read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, and speak to let go. They develop more value for themselves and others. So our purpose of this podcast is to uncover the genius of our guest with the goal to make you, the listener, your curiosity cool, because our vision is that human culture is open, curious, and focused on creating the future. So our mission is to read, write, listen, and speak every single day. Talking about speaking, I have a good friend coming on today, John Duffin of Duffin Media, who's not only an MC, not only a public speaker, not only has 29 plus years experience at high-level sales and media, actually now an entrepreneur and works advising, counseling, coaching executives, not just on sales and really higher level thinking, but narration and how to use their voice and build their brand online, offline. John has a amazing podcast, Your Message Received. We're going to unpack. I'm very energized because you're energized, and I'm excited to tell. We So first things first. How'd I do?
First things first. I am flat out honored. I love being here, Jay, and just because because we've had the pleasure of being friends. I love that you know all of that. I can't find right now a graceful way to reach. Oh, it's this hand. I'm trying to fish for the copy. Oh, there it is. I didn't want to look away from the Zoom lens. Right. So as I said, it is.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, 30 days of thought you're holding.
We'll unpack that as well too, and really it's not just the book, it's the conversation. So a lot of my ability to be able to speak more true comes from people and or relationships and or situations where I have almost had like people like pull it out of me. And so knowing that, it's like that's part of the evolution. And I love the quote, the way that you just said that. Would you mind, I don't want to come off as stupid, reread the quote one more time for me?
By the way, I think that makes me love you even more because you may be the first guest that's ever said that. And guess what? I know every time that they don't remember the quote.
You can't.
You might be the most honest person that has ever come on the Culture Matters podcast. I am so excited.
But there's a line in there that you got. Read it to me one more time, and yes. I'll lean into it.
Do not ask who I am, and do not ask me to remain the same. More than one person, doubtless like me, writes in order to have no face. Michel Foucault.
See, it's that evolutionary thing. That's what I'm excited about. You know, like I said, I was thinking about that today too. Just the evolution of our relationship, the way that things evolve and change.
What have you learned in the last 3 years since leaving corporate America?
Right.
And all that comes with it. And jumping into this beginning a company.
Yep.
What have you learned? Where do we start?
The number one thing I would say, the number one thing that I've learned is that I can trust myself more in regards to decision making and have fewer regrets than I would have ever thought. And this is from a guy that was a chronic people pleaser and constantly second guessing myself, third guessing, fifth guessing myself, that you realize in that time, especially, look, I'm the one that's running the company. I'm the one that's making the decisions. It's not like there's a hierarchy of bosses, you know what I mean, that are challenging me, but you have to live with yourself. And that's the kind of thing. I beat myself up over decisions far less. I've been able to, let's say, pivot, move in different directions, understand that I don't have to have all the answers. And I think the main thing is that I don't have to be afraid at all of what people think of a decision or a thought. And I always used to. So those are the things that I feel like
that was sabotaging you, the last one?
Oh, yeah.
And in what way? If you were to...
Oh, let me make sure I understand correctly. Like, so what I was going to say is it was prior to that. The walls that I used to put up would be, I was so deathly afraid that somebody would challenge me because I used to think, well, if you challenge me, you'll peel the layers back and realize there's nothing here. You know what I mean? I'm just the
Yeah.
and so what I've come to learn is when you put yourself in tougher situations and you expose yourself, that it's like you just don't have to carry that armor around. You know, you just don't. It's not a critical part of being. I have no problem with saying I either don't know or read the quote again, or you know what I mean? I have no problem with that. Where I would have just yesed
Wow.
you along like years ago. You would have said, "How did you like that quote?" And I'm telling you, it would have been like this. Ask me, "How did you like the quote?"
Yeah. How did you like the quote?
"I was awesome, really awesome, so powerful." And then you'd ask a follow-up question, and then I was done.
They can't hear, but I'm like really laughing because
That's what I'm saying. The follow-up would have been was always the killer. You'd
now,
say,
do
"Oh,
you
what
think that
part?"
are we alone in that? Because of course that's something I can relate to myself in my life.
We
And what
can't
are your
be.
thoughts on that? Are people listening thinking that you and I are the only ones that can relate to that, or what do
There's
what are
no
your
way.
thoughts?
There's no way. And I'm not, like I said, here's another thing. I don't need quite as much. I can't say none. I don't need quite as much validation as I
Hmm.
used to need before too. Right? Obviously, I think this is great, and but what I would say is that in terms of no, can't be because, and I'll just speak for myself. Coming from a career like that 29 like broadcast ad sales, you had to be on all the time, all the time. You happen, this is great and that's great, we're gonna do this, right? And it's like you just knew that this everybody can't be all day every day. How do you like the job? It's wonderful. I feel it's nice to be able to not be as, like I said, like I come off as more intelligent, I come off as more engaging, I come off as more authentic just by not being afraid. But that was not easy for me. So,
Wow. Is how much of that you think comes from the culture of media, like like the megalith that it is? Is that
mhm.
is there any
I
connection
think
there? You think?
I think some. I think it is in the sense that you're shined up, polished up. You're supposed to look great, suited up, dressed up, big smiles. Everything is good. The last thing in the world that you would want is to go into some sort of like a presentation and you come off like, oh, not having a good day, you know. And people are like, what the hell? See, and I think part
Is
of
it
it.
different? Is it backward or not backwards? Yeah, is it completely counterintuitive with social media
Mhm.
and podcasts and the things that you're like, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Is it
Yeah,
completely
I think
different?
it's actually similar. And here's what I would say:
Hmm.
people tune into social media for short bursts, even if it's like sometimes I catch myself scroll, but typically you're there for a short burst. You listen to music for a short period of time. You'll pick up a book for a certain period of time. In a presentation, meeting, sales, client service, whatever the case may be, the person that you're encountering is not thinking about the rest of your day or the prior week. This encounter kind of stands on its own. And that's what I kind of think what has in common with a lot of things is you've got all of these isolated moments and nobody wants you to break into their isolated moment with, oh, I'm having a rough go. Because it's like, but this is my moment. This is my encounter. And I want you on top of your game. And what I've come to realize is you just don't have to, you do not have to carry that sort of weight around. You just don't have to.
In through social media?
Oh, through social media, through any encounter, I don't think. I mean, if I'm like, I'll give you an example, right? It is authenticity to me if I'm public speaking. Now, look, if I'm giving out awards like I just did at a, I was, you know, hired to speak to give out awards at a golf event. Well, it's an isolated instance, and nobody is wanting to hear about I'm sad.
Yeah, that's a
and,
good opening, by the way.
I'm sad, and closest to the whole award goes to like they're not.
Okay. So
But
know your audience.
know your audience. Know your audience. Know the setup. Know what's expected. But I feel like I want to be more true and authentic all the time. I just feel like it's easier for me. I think I can
Have you
engage
taken
better.
that into because you're producing a lot of content
Mm-hmm.
that you're
Mm-hmm.
putting through social media,
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, Facebook. I see the videos.
Right.
Do you believe that you're at a point where that content is reflecting this philosophy?
Sometimes.
Where are you with that journey?
Yeah. Oh, way further along than I was. But that's going to be a constant work in progress. For
How
me,
can you challenge the audience to reflect if they're doing it or not doing it, if they should be doing or shouldn't be doing it? What are your thoughts on all of that? I mean, I'll make it, I ask.
Help me understand that question again.
You're putting out, what are you doing? Can you explain that to the audience? Because I have a bias. I follow you and see your videos. What have you been doing through social media when it comes to the videos that you've been putting out?
I'm going to go back, say, approximately 6 months to a year. All right. And the message, it's not a singular message, but what I am is I'm an executive coach who happens to use his voice. And so I'm demonstrating the value that I'm giving to people on social media. And that's important to me, what I'm giving, what value I'm giving, more so than what mood I'm in. Or, you know what I mean? It's what value am I giving, which is I come from a place with every video, which is the understanding that most people have some degree of difficulty articulating. Most people, and maybe that sounds weird. I believe most people, when challenged, would want to work on the way that they convey a message. And one of the reasons I feel that way is because I know I do. And one of the why this became so important to me in this journey was I remember how difficult it used to be for me, whether it was growing up or whether when I was like early on in my career, being able to say exactly what was on my mind because I never wanted to hurt anyone's feelings. And part of that was because I was mostly afraid of what would you do if I hurt your feelings, So not knowing, but under the assumption that I can't be the only one. I can't be. In the conversations that I've had with people, the tons of encounters, I've never met anybody that hasn't had some hesitancy. So the message, the value is always, you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. I'm the last person that's going to articulate saying, I know everything, or I've been everywhere, or a lot of the messages that I'm conveying are not necessarily my own. It's things that I've absorbed, things that I've seen. And if I can help one person in one social post, if I can help one person feel a little bit more in command, mostly just to say what it is that's on their mind.
Wow.
Then I feel like I've helped somebody. And then it just compounds with where you are at in your career. The public speaking, the ability to be able to present, to command, like I said, a stage or a boardroom or what have you. But I really think it all begins with, can you look somebody in the eye and tell them exactly what it is that you're trying to say and get to it without that hesitation or distraction of filtering or making it sound prettier or less this or more that, And that's kind of where it is. So everything that I'm doing is centered on, can I help one person feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more sure, a little bit more true?
What are people saying without going into anything confidential, clients or something, but like what are some of the general fears, feedback, things that you hear? What are they saying?
Yeah. So
what do they resonate with?
Yeah. So the things that, and I can remember this too. So I was in the field in the broadcast ad sales executive management for close to 30 years. And I keep drawing on it because it's the biggest stretch of time that I had professionally so far. Now look, here's hoping I'm happy, healthy, and then I take another 30-year run and
Or
that
50.
or 50, right? But what I would say is because of that big chunk and stretch of time, uh, that I would say so often when I'm talking to people, it's often not very young people that I remember being really young and nobody was going to tell me what to do, and you know what I mean. It was like and
Oh,
also
yes.
right and good on
Yeah,
them.
it's hard.
Go figure it out. That's okay.
Mm.
But for me, what I've heard is so often that you go to a certain height and then you get stuck when you're a professional. You kind of plateau, or even worse, you're sitting there and you're not accelerating and you're starting to think, oh my God, those young people that we are just alluding to are going to pass me. So I'm sitting here and I'm feeling a little bit unnerved. And now I feel like I have to do a little bit more game playing. And what I hear is, I want to stay in the game. I don't want to lose my seat at the table.
Wow.
And what can I do to stay current, to stay relevant? I don't feel like I am. And that comes down to more than just what you're saying. It's the way that you're saying it, the way that it lands, the way that it resonates. And often that's to me, I remember how that felt.
Mm.
And I remember pushing past it. And I remember watching
How'd you
others
do it?
push past. I There's a lot of things I could say, but I had one example that I
Start
can
with the
give.
most traumatic.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Welcome to another episode.
Of traumatic tales. And so I remember, like I said, the first glance that came to my mind was this. Look, so between like being a raging alcoholic for a lot of years, being closeted until I was 40 plus, I had told a few people in my immediate family that I was gay, and I remember the only way I could tell them was what if I was hammered, and nobody wanted to see another round of me hammered. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
what I would say is when I finally came out and got that out, I remember, and I laughed because it's not like anybody was even almost nobody was surprised, let alone shocked. And I'm walking around with this like big, heavy secret. And like,
I had no idea till right now.
Which, Jay, that makes me laugh out
I'm
loud.
just
Nobody's surprised. Nobody is surprised.
Wait,
Nobody.
what are you saying?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
This isn't the inclusion podcast. What are you saying? I had no idea.
You had no idea, except for
None of our listeners could.
Right. All the hitting on you that I was doing, right? I was going to say, you had no idea.
Too.
Sorry, Jenna. Right. Oh,
no, she's used to it. She's used to it. Yeah.
I love when people she's used to it.
Well,
so,
I gratefully was brought up in a very inclusive family, and I culture matters. So, but anyway,
right. But what I was gonna say is, one of the things that God, please do make the joke. That it's like, but one of the things I remember was once that was gone, it became easier for me to stay in conversations. I could and I mean, not want to change the subject. Not want to, so how about them fills? You know what I mean? In the middle of somebody trying to tell you something. I remember I could make better eye contact. And all of a sudden, I felt like the way that I was conducting myself in business changed. And in the beginning, I'm thinking I'm not as good.
Wow.
Like, oh, it's not quite the laugh riot that it was before, or you know what I mean, or, right?
Yeah.
And then the feedback was really strong, you know. And as I said, I'm not trying to tell you that to commend myself. It would be people saying that to me or those around me, and most of it had to do with just there wasn't all the chatter of what are you going to do if I tell you this, are you going to beat me up? If I disagree with you, are you going to run from me? Are you going to cancel the sale? Are you going to cancel me? Are you going, you know what I mean? And that was the first time that I remember after maybe about 6 months, right, that I would be able to walk into a room and things just felt easier. The meetings went smoother, the results were better. The engagement was like I wasn't as worried about losing my place or all that sort of thing. You just stayed in the conversation. So I would say that was I would say, like, what was the most memorable? That it ain't the only, but that's certainly one of them.
So you're not saying that everyone's gay, are you?
No.
What's holding you back, sir, is no, like so all it's like
Wouldn't that
you
be
need to you
Jay?
need
Wouldn't that be
to,
crazy if
like
that was
Oprah,
the
you need a
conclusion?
car, you need a
Right?
car.
But everybody has something they're
Yeah,
worried
that's where
about.
I was kind of alluding to with
Everybody has something that they're worried about. And by the way,
is
I'll
that the
bet.
theme of what you're finding is what you're seeing, that there's
Yeah,
something, and
yeah.
for you it was something
Hmm.
untenably personal
Hmm.
that
And
I mean that's we have to unpack the
well,
cultural,
that's the
but
that's the personal. But I'm going to say everybody. If I summed it like this, everybody probably has something they're bringing into a conversation or into a meeting that they think is a really big deal. As
hmm,
I came to learn, it wasn't a big deal because most people already knew. So what I'm saying is, but most people are thinking you're really going to care about something, and there's a good chance you probably won't. What if I don't have the
wow.
answer to their question? What if I forget one of the features and benefits I'm going to present? What if I don't remember to offer them the soccer game? My word. It's that sense of taking yourself so damn seriously that one crack and the whole presentation, relationship, whatever ends. And it doesn't. The worst part of it is you may think it's going to. It doesn't have to be like something personal like I was going through.
You think that gives you a superpower in regard to what you're doing today and who you can help today because it's so personal, your realizations?
Yeah. And I think the realization is if I don't know something, I just say I don't know. If I don't remember something, I'll just say I don't remember. You know, I if we disagree with something,
Hmm.
you and I have had a myriad of conversations about a myriad of things, personal and professional,
Yeah.
and there's a lot that we haven't agreed upon. And you know what the conclusion ultimately becomes, which is the best? So what? You know what I mean? So you're like,
Yeah.
and it's, but that sense of just being able to stay in the game, I think is the superpower. If you could stay in the game, then I'll speak for me. I can focus more on what's going on around me. The way I prep for a podcast conversation, the way
Hmm.
that I'll deliver, you know what I mean, like a speech or what have you. I don't have to be deathly afraid about ancillary things. Now, it doesn't mean I don't get nervous. It doesn't mean I don't. I do. I'm still like a bundle of nerves. But for some
Hmm.
reason, that all breaks just about the time and when it's time for me to go. But it doesn't destroy anything that I'm looking to do. And I think in terms of when you're speaking, presenting, engaging, whatever it is, whether it's a one-on-one with somebody that you care about, whether it's the biggest meeting in your life or somewhere in the middle, you
Have
know.
you found that people have a yearning to speak in front of others,
Yeah,
but it's just
yeah,
they figure out ways to convince themselves that they don't?
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely the case. Not to mention what I also see is, and what I can relate to is you're in a group setting. 6 people are in a meeting, right? 10, 50, whatever. The number's arbitrary. Let's just say there's a half dozen people that are in a meeting. And you find that typically 1 or 2 people will take the lead in the meeting. Maybe of those 1 or 2 people, one of them will want to be the most assertive, and others will start to back off. And you don't know what the contributions of those other people are going to be because they back off because they're afraid they're going to either get intimidated, shouted down. This happens in current events. This happens all the way across the board. So the the rest of the people just don't speak. And what people have said to me is they want to be heard. They want to be understood. And that's really important to me because even past all those examples that I've given, I've had conversations where I know I wasn't understood and I put that on me, not on the other person, you know?
What does that lead to?
Mhm.
What?
Prepare more, and
Mm.
mostly try to come into any conversation as unencumbered as you can be.
How does one do that?
Mm-hmm. So here's a quick technique that I teach somebody, and this is one example. And I tend to teach tactical situations because I feel like there's a million people that can teach long-term mindset solutions and long-term physicality and all that thing. I created a course and it's around 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars are marathon mindset, game day physicality, a connection aspect I call love connection based on that cheesy old show that was on the air years ago, and tech talk. And so to me, as I said, I go to tactical things because I really believe I'm going to count on the individual to be prepared. None of this takes away from preparation. None of this takes away from knowing everything. But like say, for example, you asked me for this conversation specifically this evening.
Mm.
You asked me for a timeline. Do you know I've never done that before in my life? And I thought it was great because
What you sent me was very impressive.
Thank you for that. But I
Yeah.
mean, I'm
That
telling
really
you,
helped.
that was the first time I've ever done that. So, but what does that do? Like for me, it's preparation for me too.
Mm.
It's not like I'm making things up, but you don't remember everything. But what am I saying? A short-term tactic, right? To try to come in unencumbered. I work with
Well,
a
by the way,
therapist.
I was expecting like a text of a couple dates. You this beautiful breakdown. I mean, what a testament to your character.
Brother, thank you for that.
We
I
could
ran out of
unpack that. Everybody gotta understand. Like John really developed a timeline. Like he's on your team if you're doing something together.
You're so
Wow,
kind to say it. Not to
made my life a lot easier.
I put up that horrific picture of me graduating high school, and just the fact that I have the bravery to do that. But what I was going to say, here's a tactical thing you can try, right? Mindset wise, I often get really nervous before I present. I've come to realize that's fine. That's just a part of who I am, and so. How do you get rid of it? Because you don't want to finish this. So how do you get rid of it? So I work with a therapist who also happens to be a zonefulness coach. He works with the University of Pennsylvania sports teams and Rutgers, and he's also a friend of mine. His name is Joseph Dowling, and his book is called Zonefulness. I have worked with Joe Dowling for over 30 years.
Wow.
One of the things that he taught me was what he called, it's a combination of things. It's a breathing technique, which I call the Navy SEALs breathing technique, because it is the Navy SEALs breathing technique to get them out of panic attacks. And he combines it with what he calls a body of evidence affirmation, right? So I just used this when I gave that first public speech for the Real Producers, Great Producers Awards Gala. And I had technically never given a speech I've given presentations in front of people, but I had never given a speech which was 10 minutes before an audience.
Wow. And which is very surprising, by the way, because I digress.
For both of us. It was surprising for both of us. I mean,
I'm surprised that you never did it before, but we'll unpack that.
Absolutely. And it was, and we'll come back to that and remind me to put a placeholder in that of what the organizer said to me about that exact what I just said to you. But what I would say is it's about 10 minutes before, and I'm on the stage and people are just starting to come in, and I'm pacing the room and I'm a wreck. I am an absolute wreck. The room is way bigger than I thought it was going to be. I find out it's oversold. And I'm like, and then not because of me, but I was gonna say it is jam-packed with table seats. It goes straight back and butted against like these glass doors in the back. And I'm looking around like, oh my God. And I'm starting to, and I'm gonna lose my place, and I'm gonna forget, and I'm gonna, all right. So here was the technique, and I can vouch for it personally. The Navy SEALs breathing technique. It is, remember the numbers 4, 4, 4. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale for 4 seconds. Navy SEAls use that.
I already feel better.
Right, in a body of water, they use that when they're worried they're going to drown. This is their exact, and you do that 3 or 4 times, right? But what Joe Dowling gave to me, the technique, which absolutely was incredible, was cement that thought with what he calls a body of evidence. Everybody has done something in their life that they're proud of. Everybody has. You should have a few at the ready. If it's linear, like in that specific case, I'm going to speak in front of an audience. I could remember the presentation I gave to the Ford Dealers Association board with 100 people. I could draw on that and remember that feedback. But it doesn't have to be linear. I could draw on something I never thought I could do in my mid-50s running a marathon. And remember when I finished. Please don't ask me what place I came in. I think it was 57,000th or something. I think most of the city of Chicago got done before me, including people that weren't running that day. I think got there faster. But you remember, but think about that when you're breathing. And this is all taking about 30 seconds at the most, right? But you're just remembering, I've done it before. I belong in the room. I belong in the room because this has happened and happened successfully. This is not the first time. And all of a sudden I remember,
wow,
the music starts, they hand me the microphone and I'm laughing, but it's like, and everything was great.
So what was the feedback from it? Were people saying, boy, this guy's only done this once, or were, you know,
thank you for asking. Thanks for reminding me, because I would have already forgotten, right? So afterwards, the organizer, Josh Buchter, who I love to death, and we've talked about you, and I watched your interview of him, and I told you it was one of my.
We got to have him on here.
You gotta
on the YouTube, but it's not here yet. We're gonna have to have him on the Culture Matters podcast.
Jay, it was one of my favorite openings I had ever seen of a podcast. I just died laughing.
That's
and it was like, so what exactly is a Wolf of Broad Street? And that was your first question. And I loved it. I'm crazy about Josh Buchter. Great and guy. Everything about it, just great and successful and a sweetheart. So everything of like the perfect combination, right? So I remember saying to him afterwards, I'm like, and I'm like, Josh, and technically, I've never done that before. I mean, I've spoken in front of large groups, but I've never given. And this is what he said. One more reason I love the guy. He's like, and you do know I never asked you if you had before, right? He goes, wow. I just knew that you could. He said, I just knew that you could. That's why I selected you. And I got to tell you, you can't have too many people in your world that give you that sort of like a confidence jolt. You know, you asked me what I tried.
Amazing thing to say.
Right. Brought tears to my eyes. But here's the thing. You had asked me earlier, what am I trying to do with the social media content? And I said, well, if you can help one person. And that's another thing, which is try to say something as direct and on point to someone. Hard to do with social media and you're not speaking to them individually, right? But if you could say something specific that somebody could latch onto so that they have a little bit more confidence to resume. So now it's like I did a second event for Josh and I identify myself as a public speaker. A big part of it is because he gave me the opportunity. I loved it. I was grateful that I wanted to be prepared for it. I wanted to honor Josh. I wanted to honor the people in the room, you know? So I
Mm.
took it seriously and all that sort of thing. But then it's all of this in terms of the speaking and presenting is it's so many times I've done it in my life. You can sabotage yourself at the finish line. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't be good. But if I had just started to go off in my head and I didn't
Uh-huh.
solve that a few minutes before, it probably wouldn't have been as good because I'd have been carrying something.
Do you find that you see people in those
Hmm.
positions,
Hmm.
they may not have access to the information you just shared?
Hmm.
So they, sorry, I got really startled.
That's okay.
It's, I'm home alone. Like, I thought I heard something. Um, leave it in, leave that in. It's real.
Absolutely.
It's
As
authenticity.
long as nobody's getting hurt.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get, yeah, I'm not, Jen is in Rhode Island and like, who knows? Maybe someone's knocking on the door. But anyway, I digress. So this is my question. Do you find that people that are in positions of authority on the stage,
Yeah.
you see them kind of fall into something and all of a sudden it's
Hmm.
all about them?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that happen in your view? How do
Hmm.
you avoid that?
Hmm.
What do you think?
Here's
Does
a
that give
guess.
you
Guess. If you're fixated on what's your next talking point, bullet point, did I cover bullet point number 3A, 3B? I can't be as engaged. I hate when guests literally do what I'm about to do with you, which is blow smoke up your backside by saying, one of the things that you do really well,
well, yeah,
that
go
you
ahead.
do really well,
Enough
that is
about me, more
right,
about me. That's
right,
my
right,
buddy say
right,
that.
right,
Yeah.
right. But I'll do it anyway, which is reminding me of how important it is to prep.
Mm,
And so I think the easiest way to get out of that is to be prepped enough, prepared enough,
mm.
so that you could be as loose and easy, and then you're so much less likely to go into okay, now more about me,
Wow.
because I gotta get back. Hey, that was great, but I got to get back to paragraph 4 here.
What are
And
your
this,
thoughts on people that read the sheet?
oh my, all right. So I
Can we
came.
unpack that and maybe
Uh,
set the frame a little bit for the audience? Because they
yes,
might be in the position
please.
someday where they're on the stage
Mhm,
and they're asked to talk to let's say, read somebody's bio or give
mhm,
out an
mhm,
award,
mhm,
or maybe they want to
mhm,
be on the stage, whether a speaker or an MC or
mhm,
something, and they want,
mhm.
or maybe they just want to be successful and they haven't realized yet that being on the stage sets that up for you. So
Yes.
can you elaborate on like what are we talking about
Yeah.
right now that might be going over people's heads?
I love this. So again, my background. We present it all the time in broadcast advertising sales. We present it internally, business plans, high level finance, client meetings. So it was one PowerPoint presentation after another. And I'll never forget this. It's not like I made this up. So two quick examples. Not like number one. I remember the first example. I went to a company, one of the largest companies in the world, and I was the local sales manager there. And I remember watching a system where we had an amazing research director who basically built the case for you. That's what they did. They got the statistics and they were
Mm,
building a story. And I would watch people do this, and it was mind numbing to me. And early in my career, I actually did it, which was you take the information that they give you and you read it out loud. You basically read the PowerPoint slides out loud, very often with no preparation. So it looked like you were getting the data at the exact moment that you were presenting it to the client.
um,
And you would say something like, oh, and on station X, on our station, we are number one in early news in 4 different demographics. How about that? And it's like, it was painful to me to watch that because the role of the person reading the information
holy
was,
cow.
oh, this is for big money. I mean, you're going for big money, but because it was kind of accepted, That's how it went. I was out of my mind because the fact of the matter is the engagement was zero. Zero. Same example of if you didn't have enough, if you didn't feel strong enough with your case, what did you do? You threw more bullet points on the PowerPoint slide and then read it to them. So you would be throwing these pages up of just utter nonsense. Read them out loud. It would freak me out. And I just remember thinking there had to be a better way. Example two. This was, you would ask me how things were, like, how did things change and evolve? This specific example of a case, I brought up a presentation. It'll just sound so boring on the surface when I talk about the case of the Ford Dealers Association. It's not the most fascinating case study, right? We want you to buy advertising so you'll sell more cars. That's basically, there you have it.
Fair enough.
There's the argument. But we were called in, and I remember I'm the manager and my salesperson, or we're called in, and the client's like, well, we're gonna have to cancel you because I'm like, what? Yeah, see, it's just not working, and we're gonna have to and I almost died. I was very recently the manager there, and it's our biggest account, and they're gonna cancel us. And I'm like, I don't know what to do, but for some reason I knew I had to do something. One of the team literally says to me, and I've never, and this used to be things that used to terrify me. So they said, John, you have to tell us exactly what you want us to do. Well, that was awful for me because I felt like I never wanted to assert myself because I go back to, I was always so deathly afraid, you know? And what we did was we created a legit story. And one of the things I came to realize and learn was not how amazing I am. It was more of the sense of ease that I could tell a story, a legit one, where I could make legit eye contact, I could talk, I could laugh, I could be appropriate at the, you know what I mean? Say the right things in the right way, because we knew exactly what we were going to do. But we weren't giving a speech or reading a script or deluging people with just minutia. So what I would say to anybody is this: to give yourself the confidence to speak true. Number one, you have to be more true. One of the ways to be a little less afraid is to at least go in to give yourself a chance to know as much as you can know without overwhelming yourself. You know, it's not the finals where you're trying to just get so immersed with data and then you just pass out when it's time to speak. Give yourself the chance to be able to speak and engage with data. And you would say, well, what do I think about that? Know one less statistic and have one more contact point. If it's, I have a legitimate contact point and I look at you and I can speak to you directly about something and I forget a bullet point, great.
And are we leading with the story?
Yes, you have to.
Whatever I've got on my paper.
Oh, you have to.
That's the moral.
That's the moral.
And essentially you have shared a story right now.
Yeah. Any way, right?
Helps me learn this.
Yeah. Right. It's how do you convey a point that you can engage somebody and utilize your voice appropriately? You cannot read. Look, I could read.
So what do you think of the person that's reading on the podium?
They're not ready.
The award, the bio of the person. They need to stop doing that and do what? Share what they know about the person?
Share what they know about the person. Or that, maybe the night before. You don't have to turn this into a 6-month project. We're going to give Lightspeed the award for, okay, could you Google them for 5 minutes? Could you find a relatable point? A relatable point, not every point, not A to Z. Jay, you didn't have to know from, Christ, you want to get old fast? do a timeline. And you're like, oh my God, these years are way back.
Yeah, I'm still trying. We got to unpack Villanova. What were you doing over there? 76 to 96 or 87 to 90.
Or as I call it, 20 of the best years of my life. 20 of the best years. Oh my God, you're not.
I even put it on a board. You can't see this, but it's your life right here.
Well, there are a
I showed John the easel for the I call it a culture map.
Mm-hmm.
The culture map is how I prepare for everything.
Right.
It's like, hey, and if you don't have a timeline, I mean, no one's ever been as prepared or thorough as you. I go to LinkedIn. It's like, all right, where did someone go to school? Where'd they go to high school? How old were they at this time? How old? And now it's like, wow, okay, where are the gaps? It's so fascinating to me to look at that. So how do you, so in the spirit of preparation, right?
Yeah.
If you're talking to somebody that says, hey, I have to do a 10-minute presentation in front of an audience. I have a relatively high competence at what I do, but I'm definitely afraid of standing on that stage. How do we bring some of these tips into like a sequence?
I gotcha.
Someone listening to this is like, wow, I don't need the course, but you know what? Let me buy it anyway. I feel guilty for not. Giving it, you know what I'm saying?
I love
it's all backwards.
I love the way you said that. Now I'll give you the exact answer, and then if I can back it into the course modules, I will. But I'd rather give you a direct answer, which is this: the best way for me to answer that question is simply to tell you what I did. The night when it was determined I was going to be the host of the Real Producers Great Producers Awards Gala. John, you're going to give 10 minutes before we start. That was the setup. You're going to go for 10 minutes. What do you want me to talk about? Whatever you want. But okay. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes that's great. And sometimes if you were like a nerve job like me, that could just lead to a lot of second guessing and overthinking. Okay. 10 minutes is a lot, as I learned, is a lot of ground to cover. Right. And then after the 10 minutes, we're going to get the award show going and we're going to do this and this and this. Okay, got it. So here's what I did. I started to think, and it's a bunch of high-powered realtors. Jay, you and I both know most of them that were in the room that night. And my first thought was, I'm stealing this from my cousin who shared this about her interviewing skills. And it's my cousin Sheila Wacko that works for NBC 10. And I saw her quote, and I love Sheila as a person. I've always did. But what I learned, she said one of the first things she does in prep is go back a little bit, research to see what somebody hasn't been asked 100 times. If I start with a bunch of realtors and start talking about GCIs and interest rates and inventory, and it's like, I'm like, I don't want to go in that direction because this has been covered and covered and covered. So my first thought was, all right, what haven't they had a bunch of, and something occurred to me, and it was, they're all different. They're all different. I don't mean different individuals. They're all different. And in a world that I used to remember where different was weird and different is bad the way I perceived it. You're going to laugh at me because I'm different. I'm the bookwormy dweeby type, whatever. Don't point and laugh at me. I'm different. So I'm going to try to be just like you. Whereas I started to think, well, they're different because they're either the 4 a.m. club or the 5 a.m. club, or they're at the gym at 4:30, or they're reading a book, and it's like, that's different. And I came up with something so basic in the first thought, and the topic just became different is good. And I'm like, okay. So the very next thing I did was just start to go. I recorded it. And by the way, this is something I've shared this with other people. The best way to get your thoughts out, you've taught that in terms of way, record it. record it, go to a microphone, go to your voice notes, go to your phone, record it, get your thoughts out. Editing is so much easier than creating, right? And so I remember, I'm like, I have a basic idea, so I just recorded it. And I sent it to the organizer. I said, this is raw and flawed and all that kind of thing. I just want to see if I'm heading in the right direction before I go too much further. I don't want to do all this and then find out this ain't what you want, but is this, am I in the right direction? Send them and I send them the audio. Comes back, it's great, run with it. Okay. Then it was like, okay, identifying certain points. You can't please every single person in the room. You're not going to have enough time. Identify certain people. What do? Then hope they show up in person. So I was there early. I'm rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing and tightening and tweaking and all that sort of thing. I was there a few hours early with Josh and with Beth, and they're doing all this crazy heavy lifting. They are so hands-on with their events that they were doing so many things. And I went to the name tags and I wanted to see, well, who RSVP'd? Oh, look, Mike McCann's going to be there. Oh, look, Chris Stevens is at table 5. Oh, look, you know what I mean?
Two amazing people right there.
Right. And I found 4. And I moved the comments to those 4 people. So the next thing I did, I told you about the breathing, and now it's time to go. Now it's time. So I've prepped and prepped and prepped. I had a bunch of cards in my hand in case I was going to lose my place. 10 minutes before, as I said, I'm almost hyperventilating. I do the technique, I do the breathing, and I made a decision. And I ditched the cards.
Wow.
I literally moved them where I couldn't get my hands on them. I just didn't throw them out. There was no trash can, but I was like, I just moved them out of the way. I'm like, we're just going to go. We're just going to go. I found those 4 people in the room. And most of the beginning part of that presentation, I call them plants, and it's the best way to speak in terms of a room. The easiest way to get centered is find a few friendly faces. You only need 3 or 4 just to get yourself centered. So I could literally look at, I am like a groupie with Chris Stevens. I love him to death. He's one of my favorite people. He's just the best. So I would look at Chris. And a buddy of mine, Ian McKee, with a big smile on his face, a financer, I'm looking at him and I'm looking and just say, oh, there's Jay Doran smile. And the plants, I'm looking at 3 or 4 people. And that's, to me, when I talk about the connection aspect, find the people that are giving you either they're nodding their head or they're smiling or they're at least a little bit engaged. And you'd be amazed at how your comfort just kind of snaps in. It's really hard if you're speaking to somebody with a smile on their face and it's like, oh, they actually care what you're saying, for you to lose your place and die. You just won't. Wow. You just won't. By the way, as I was taught by a renowned voice coach, business voice coach, his name is Dave Walsh, and his company is called The True Tell.
The True Tell?
A True Tell, exactly. It's the authenticity in your voice. From Dave Walsh, what he said, when you are fully connected and engaged, your voice will never let you down. Ever. All that doubt or upspeak or am I doing okay? Or the shouting or screaming or whispering because you're uncomfortable. If you're engaged, it doesn't happen. So find a couple of plants. So the preparation was understanding what hasn't been done before, sending it out to make sure that you're not wasting anyone's time, rehearsing like crazy so I could improvise. That end speech that I gave that night, I'll bet you, I don't have a full recording. I wish I did. And the main reason I wish I did, I'd like to hear how different it actually was than what was the actual intended version. But I know it was different. And I didn't care at all, because what happens is this, that's that sense of the
Mm,
preparation brings you to a place where if your nerves are going to go, you can take a situational tactic to get you out of that nerve. The physicality part that I've used is something as simple as literally here on a Zoom call. How many Zoom calls have you been on where people have done this? You know, or are whispering, or I can't hear you, or they're screaming. The physicality is
yeah.
just being in a position where you can sound like your breathing is not labored and you don't sound nervous, or he's gonna pass out, right? And it's making sure that everything is going to work for you. And then you're authentic. And if you do those things, and they do take some time, it's not nothing, you know what I mean? But if you do those things, I don't have to worry if you ask me a question I wasn't counting on. Like right now, right? If you, oh, well, I didn't know you were going to ask me. I think we're going to talk about it.
Mm.
Because I could be fully engaged and listen and watch you. And we can talk about anything you want, you know?
This is like a master class on how to be an MC. I mean, that is what it is. Um, and you, okay, so then what?
Mhm.
Then what happened?
So the
Like,
end
how
result.
did that impact
Mhm.
your personal brand, your
Yeah, yeah.
business? Because you're making, so number, you're making this sound easy,
Mhm.
which is a testament to your understanding of it.
Mhm.
If the audience goes back to 30 minutes ago, you had said, this
Mhm.
was the first time that I did this. And the person that
Mhm.
gave me the opportunity to do this said, I just knew that you were the
I
guy
just knew
for
that
it.
you
I mean,
could.
that's,
Yep.
and but
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
a fair amount of experience being in that position. And
Sure.
I say that you know what
Mhm.
you're talking about, because
Right.
the only thing I'd say you missed out is the
Mhm.
when people say, make believe the audience make
Mhm.
they're naked.
Mhm.
I usually make believe I'm naked. And I
See, I
really get
have, oh,
energy.
I have such body complexes. I could not.
So it's
Jesus.
like, see, that's my ego coming into this.
I
Yeah, but
love the
like
way you just said that. Right? Right. But my.
this is what I want to stress on this
Mhm.
episode, is that the audience has to understand that what you did,
Mhm.
number one, it's exceptional. Number two, you're
Mhm.
proving that someone that doubts themselves can do it.
Absolutely.
And I can't imagine that people listening to this
Mhm.
cannot resonate with that.
Yeah. See, that's the fun part for me, which is it's nobody has to be a finished product. So you asked me, so what happens then? And so I'll
Mm,
tell you what happened. Like, I'll
amazing
give you the
story.
immediate, but I got to tell you here, it's like if you don't keep applying for like that sense, if you just drift back into the woodwork, most people do that too, and I've done that. But let me answer, like, here's what I remember. So it gets done, and I knew it was good. I knew it was good. I'm not going to act like that naive. I knew it resonated. Things like people laughed when you would think it was the right time. Right? You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
seemed to
With
be a
you, not at
connection.
you.
Exactly, exactly. And we're smiling authentically, and people were coming up to me, and you know what I mean? And so I knew that. But let me give you really, like we talked about Josh and what he said, and why you need to have people around that, like these example. One more example, right? And there was a bunch of people, and I'm going to leave people out, but I'm going to single out one individual. And so I remembered I brought up Chris Stevens before, right? So Chris was the first person to arrive at the event. How do I know? I was all nutsed out rearranging my cue cards and rewriting on top of notes upon notes upon notes before I decided to throw them out. I'm writing, frantically writing on cards and all that
Wow.
stuff. And I am basically in the live casino. I've got Rivers Casino. Sorry, the Rivers Casino. Sorry.
You were busy preparing for other things. What can we
In what I'm going to
say?
call, and basically the prize closet, because we were in this room and all of the tchotchkes, the bags and the are all
Mm,
in this room, and me, and I'm dressed like a bum. Like I have my tux like in a bag, like over here, right? And I'm all like And I look up and Chris Stevens is wearing what looks like $1 billion suit, right?
Mm.
And I look up, and I look nuts, nuts. And I'm like, he's like, John, you might want to think about getting ready soon. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's starting in a half hour. Oh, so we go from that to after. I see Chris walking out, right? And I go chasing after him at that point. I literally go chasing after him because I'm like still the clingy, needy type, right? I just need to, I'm like, was it okay? He's got a drink in his hand. He's like, puts a drink down, comes back over, throws his arms around me, and I quote, he's like, Duffin, fucking crushed it. Well, I just start like bawling like a weirdo, right? So what does that do? What it does is remind me, you just said it, which is you don't have to be completely ready. You don't have to be a finished product.
Mm.
I wasn't ready 30 minutes before. Although here's what I would share with no secret, but with anybody in the audience, I absolutely was ready.
Yeah, it's like a mental battle.
Absolutely. That's it. It's the last battle. Thank you. It's the mental battle of, are you ready enough? And if I wanted to go to my old mindset of, no, you're not ready. No, you're not. Or of that sense of ditch the cards. That's the one thing that I coach now the most, which is obviously the cliche is you're more ready than you think. But the reality is, if you do the prep work so that you could stand and speak confidently, and all confidently is if I forget something, I'm okay. That's okay. I'll learn from it.
Is the theme there is you're the only person that's going to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the point is for them to get the value anyway.
Yeah, get the value anyway. The humanity. I watched somebody, I remember helping somebody at an open house with real estate. And I remember watching, somebody asked them a question. And I just remember the answer immediately being, don't know, but I'll find out and I'll call you back. I didn't care about that. I watched the reaction of the two people that asked the question. And a big smile broke on their face. Like, I'm going to get taken care of. Not the expert doesn't know the answer, so therefore they must not be an expert, or therefore they must not be a good person.
Yeah, what if it's backwards? The expert is just honest.
Just honest. And you could see this big, nice smile on their face, and they're like, oh, great. Okay, cool. Thanks. And that person that I was with, in my eyes, immediately became smarter, more skilled, more confident, cooler. You know what I mean? All the things that when I was young, I didn't think that was me. I could read a book. I could take a test. You know, you had talked about the Villanova part of the 20 years thing, and you would ask me,
what were you trying to learn everything? It sounds like that.
No, it's funny you say.
More interested in extracurricular activities? Like, is it?
Let's go with that.
Interesting.
Let's go with that.
Graduate with communications, right?
Yeah. So I started as I call it, 20 of the best years of my life, I say sarcastically, to get that elusive 4-year degree. And so what it was.
We all have to know now.
Yeah.
It sounds like that prepared you for this speech.
Well, you would think, right? So what it did, so I started, when I was on, I was good. I'm grateful to say that I have some proficiency in terms of intelligence, and I know how to study and I know how to take tests. Apparently, I also know how to drink, even though it was terrible. I was a terrible drinker. I invested, close to 30 years trying to teach myself how to be better. So I just would try every trick in the book. And I remember first pass at Villanova, because we're going to call that third time was the charm. First 2 times I was uninvited out of Villanova, which I can say for some crazy reason, smiling now, like I would never admit that. Right?
Is this just like frat culture?
Oh, I was commuting. right? So I would show up at frat parties, but I was not a frat person at all. You know what I mean? I'm just some weirdo trying to make a friend. And I would just, and forgive me, I just lost my train of thought, but I was going to say, but what I would do is I arranged my classes so that I had days off in the middle and I could go out that night and not pay for it and all that stuff. And then eventually what would happen would be I flunked out of Villanova the first time.
Hmm.
I begged to get back in, took a couple of courses, got back in, drank myself out of school a second time, and then just stopped. Then just wound up going into the field that I wound up being in.
Did it
Was
save your life in a sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So I to my
Yeah.
left, and they can't see because there's audio, but I mean, I'm surrounded by books, but I've got the big book next to
Oh
me.
my God, right? Yeah, yeah.
Next to the dictionary, the thesaurus, and the Howard Stern and some other finance books. I got
That
the
breadth
big
of
book.
knowledge, I think, is
Bill's-
quite good. Yeah, right, right.
So have you read this? It's Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, yep.
And like, how do you know if one is listening to this,
Mhm.
if they should read this book? And I'm really
Well,
serious about
right.
this. Bill and
Thank you.
everything.
Sure.
Um,
Well, here's going to be a terrible answer, but I'll give it. The answer is I don't know that. Here's what I do know. Everybody in my circle knew I drank badly. My friends and family all knew I drank badly. They all knew that. There was no mystery to that part. But I will say, because I was likable, because, you know what I mean? They weren't like I would get second chance, third chance, fourth chance, 10th chance with family members and friends and stuff like that. For me, I guess it was prior to like that. Then I couple of car accidents that I had, thankfully, like things like I was the classic bad drinker.
hmm.
But my thought was for forever was I was going to drink better. I never wanted to stop.
Was
I
it
just
the
didn't
Long
want to-
Island iced teas?
Oh my God. All right, can I ask you?
I'm the only guy that drinks those, I thought.
So
Then we're away one time, and I asked for that, and they all looked and they said, "What?"
brother, there was a
Jersey
bar.
Shore.
There was a bar in Margate called Moylan's, and they were the home of the Long Island iced teas, right? So
Really? Good to know.
So they were like, do you know where Cookies and all that like by
Yeah,
there?
I
It was
love it
right.
over there.
It was right by there, and they were gutted. So that would be the place we'd go, where it would be.
Well, the best thing about the Long Island is you only need 3 to get really.
Dude, Jay, and they were in glasses that were like 40. They were like big gulp glasses. So I remember it's like, well, we're just gonna have one, and then we would have 3, and then we'd get carried home. And should you read the book? I don't know that, but what I do know is this: if you think it's a problem, if you like, I knew, but what I got confused about or tried to rationalize or whatever was, again, if I just drank better, everything would be fine.
See, I stopped drinking because I was gonna not be able to provide for myself,
Mm-hmm.
like as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. How did you know that?
Rationally, it just seems you're gonna drink, you might as well get very toasted.
Okay.
And there's
Okay.
ramifications to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, were you angry when you were drunk, or were you more of like you were having so much fun, and then maybe you ended up in places that you didn't realize you'd end up in?
Absolutely.
It's the latter?
That,
Okay.
and I'll give you one more. Yeah, you're right there. And the other thing I'll add is not necessarily, and not angry. I was more the sloppy, pathetic drunk. Have you ever been around those people and those sloppy, pathetic ones, and they just look like,
I don't know, because maybe, I'd be lying to myself and others, maybe, because if I said no, well, how could I know if I'm drunk in those settings? I'd probably be that person, right? Like, I don't drink enough to know.
right? But if you saw somebody and you're like, oh my God, that's pathetic. Oh my God, they're pathetic. It's more like that. That sloppy, crying jag, like all weird. Like that was me. And so my thought was always going to be, I'll fix it next time. I'll only drink X. I'll work out before I drink. I'll work out after. I'll eat pasta before. I'll be the last one to arrive. I'll be the first one to leave. And for me, and what was in my world for a lot of years, I'll be the Monday to Friday. I'll be the absolute hustling, crushing it at work. And then weekend and then Sunday night, Sunday evening, I would drive over to my parents' house and showered, and nobody was the wiser, or so I thought. And so then all of that was so until it wasn't. And I can remember last drink I had was in the year 2000, and it was a car accident. And I remember back then that it was a case where they had answering machines. You're way too young to remember this horrible technology. It's
Yeah,
like
what are you talking about?
It's like a cassette player.
Yeah.
It would be like a
Oh,
cassette
stop. I know
player
what that is.
plugged into your telephone, right? And so and so I remember the cassette player was completely full with messages like, where the hell are you? Where the hell are you? And where I happened to be was getting my blood work drawn at some hospital. And I remember.
Hey, if someone's listening to, first of all,
Yeah.
what are your beliefs of like the labels with the alcohol? Like,
Tell me what you mean.
Are you pro label? Like people say,
Help
hey,
me.
I'm
What is?
alcoholic.
Very individual. I'm very individualistic with this, so I'll share.
I'm
this.
curious what you think of that.
Yeah, Jay, for years, I didn't talk about this at all publicly. I didn't talk about this for years, and my thought is it's similar to like personal things to me are personal. I don't out people thinking it helps them. I don't need to like identify, I'm absolutely making this up. Well, Jay had that book, so that must mean he's an alcoholic, like he must be a Howard Stern alcoholic too. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not.
Yeah, I got Mein Kampf next to Adam Smith over here.
He's a Mein Kampf Alice.
That's a terrible.
Right. But what I'm saying is that sense of therefore you must be is a really tough road to go on. So for myself, I finally get time and age and experience, right? I was really quiet about it, but as time went on, I just got a little less like worried about what you think, and that is a part of me. And my thought, it's the same way. If I can help somebody feel a little less uncomfortable, because what I remember was most of the time, my life, even though there were absolutely happy moments when I was an adult, I remember I lived in the same home I live in now. I was doing well in a field. I drove a fun car. I had a lot of friends. So it wasn't like, it was the worst time of my life and I was homeless and blah, blah, blah. What was really rough was I thought I was going to throw all of it away.
Wow.
And that's the part where it was like, so I'm going to fix it by drinking better. And so with Villanova,
if someone's listening to this and is thinking like on their own life, what are some things that they could say, oh, maybe I shouldn't drink it as much or any more? Like, what are some signs?
Right.
And I'm, and then, by the way, I'm open to being accused of being anything. Like, I don't, and I just want to say that so I'm not omitting. Like, I'm open to, if you think, Jay, I think you have a problem, I'm open to you saying that.
Yeah, but here's what, right? But
I'm curious, like the audience, like maybe there's people listening to this that are where you were.
Yeah.
And they don't know it. So what are the signs that you could?
I'll give you a couple. When you wake up the next day, are you happy? Are you thinking like I did? Often. Here was me, right? Here was a good wake up morning. Would be like, okay, did anything happen last night? No. Did I crash a car, get in an argument, knock over a lamp, break somebody else's furniture, vomit? But no, no. Oh, great. Off we go.
Mm.
If the answer to any of those was yes, and are you waking up with regret? Right? Like, I did that a lot. I wish I had done that less. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like that sense of accepting the sense of, well, yeah, I broke a lamp. Yeah, I fell on my face. Yeah, I fell down a flight of stairs. Yeah, ugh. And B, do you continue doing the same thing the next day and or night? Even though you
Like the
swore.
behaviors in spite of the regret.
Yeah, you have all the regrets and then you go back and do it again anyway.
So the habits contradict the awareness and the yearning for
Yeah,
something
so
else.
you go right back. I'll never forget.
There's an addiction there potentially.
Yeah, that's it. So I'll never forget
Powerful.
making a fool out of myself at a party, falling all over, and and these are several people that I love to death. One of them, because I kept falling, like literally slaps me in the face. Next day, oh, it was a weekend beach house, so that was Friday. Saturday, I'm gonna pour myself another right from the keg. And land on the ground again. And somebody, I still remember the person saying, I can't believe you're doing that again. Think of that. Are you repeating the behaviors that you feel really bad about? That's a problem. I can't answer who's an alcoholic and who isn't. What I'm only going to identify, which I think is a problem, is it a problem? And that sense of, for me, I could go from Monday to Friday and not, I think it's like it gets severe when you can't go an extended period of time without drinking. You know, I think that's a real red flag, and that was mine.
Drinking and interacting with weekend warriors so that I could be successful with my business. And I think that was a great decision. I had a gentleman on the show recently who attributes his multi-million-dollar empire to his admitted alcoholism and cutting that out. His name is Jefferson Rogers. He's very open about this, his view of it. If anyone's listening to this, hasn't listened to episodes, great segue point. You guys compliment each other really well, like in the context of the. So
I'd say talk to somebody. That's point number 4. People are more aware than you think. And especially when they have your best interests at heart. Like, I'll give it, here you go. I hope.
See, like, I have crazy discipline.
You do, and I know you.
Could my discipline just be masking my addiction?
Or could
is that possible?
It could be, but I also think I was actually
philosophizing.
I was going to use you as the example, which is you stopping for an extended period of time. To me, I'm no doctor and I'm no, alcoholic expert, but what I would say is, I just speak for me, I would think that's a pretty good indicator that, to myself, that you have less to worry about because you've done that.
You know where my real worry, though, does come from? My awareness that my biological mother was addicted to drugs and alcohol at 7, 10, 12 years old.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that, and I've never met her. Well, I met her young, but I don't remember her, and I haven't seen her in my whole life. So I think there's this deep fear.
Could it be you?
Have a proclivity to. I'm talking about my biological mother.
And you're thinking, could it be me too?
So then my adopted mother, who has amazing restraint, I believe I give her a lot of credit. I learned a lot from her growing up with her. Like, she wanted to quit smoking, she just stopped.
Yeah,
she told me that story young, and I never forgot. I was like, wow, I'm proud of her. So I think that embedded in my subconscious. Well, in 2020, as you alluded, I said, oh, I'm not going to drink until 2024. I'm not going to eat an edible until 2020. I'm not going to smoke a cigar until 20. And it's 2020. Today is what? November.
It's November 2022, and you're
I'm still
ready
at
to
it.
hit, and you're still at that. To me,
I can't wait to have that drink.
Right, but you're
Woo!
not. But you're not. So the difference for me is I never, ever,
It's
ever
not like
could
one
have
more
done that.
day. It's like 4
Oh,
more
right.
years.
It's 4 more years, and you're like, hey, fine. And when it gets here, I can't wait. On the other hand, if you were like, you know what? Well, listen, the elections are coming up and I'm worried, so I'm gonna I'm gonna pop the, that's the thing. I was incapable. And so for myself, I flunked out twice at Villanova. I went back at night and finished. I remember all of the majors that I took every business major in the world, drank myself out 2 different times, and then I remember going back. So I'm working and I'm doing okay, and I'm happy with what I'm doing. But there was this kind of hole in my heart that I hadn't finished something. And no one was asking me to. No, nobody was asking. Nobody, you know what I mean? Nobody. Where did you go to school is what typically comes up. Not when did you. If they went to Villanova like me, they will ask, when did you graduate? You know what I mean? Because they were there and it's something in common, But often people don't. But I kept thinking, this is weird. So I remember going back to the registrar's office, right? And I'm a full-blown adult now. And I'm in the registrar's office and I forget, because I'm thinking the registrar was like the big, mean, professorial type, and I walk in and I think the person I'm talking to, I swear to God, they look like they were in high school, And I'm like sitting there talking to them and they're going through my transcripts and they're like, Mr. Duffin. I'm like, you can call me John. You can call me John. And they're like, it's a very interesting transcript, A A A A A F F F F A A A A F F F F A A A F.
Wow.
And so they're like, well, how hell-bent are you to graduate with a business degree? I'm like, I don't care what I get out of here with. I said, I'm in the communications field and I love it. I want to be in communications. They're like, well, if you move it to arts with a concentration in communications, we can get you through.
So you were working at this time?
I'm working full time.
You're working for the TV, right? I saw that.
I'm working with a television station. I'm working with a television station.
Hey, what do you think about this idea that I'm gonna go? I'm gonna take classes.
Good.
Within this decade, like I want to. What's your advice? I'll be in I will be in my late 30s, early 40s when I go to university.
Oh, yes, please.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, please. And even better, take whatever the hell you feel like. Here's what I remember. I go back, so we agree, and I go back at night. It was the most enjoyable time for me. I was so willing and eager to learn. I loved the experience. I loved it. I was not, if you had to be, you know what, John,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm saying if you were like, I'm going to go into pre-med, and if you do, great. But I was going to say, I'm going to go into pre-med, and here are the prerequisites. You're going to have to take this course, this course. I think that would be really hard. And my question back to you would be, how badly do you need that specific information? If it's a quest or a yearning to learn.
Yes.
Which absolutely embodies you, it's like, go do it. In any sequence.
So my question to you is, what was it? Because this is where my head's at. So I'd like your personal experience to jump, off of here. Ping pong is the professors. Were they receptive of you? Was that value at because part of my thinking is I read so much and constantly. I'm to the point where I've read so much, I realize why school exists. Because you can't read it all.
No.
And you run out of time and the books pile up. And it's like, I need a genius, someone that spent their whole life to study this one thesis to just help me with it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. That's why I have this deep yearning to go to college. But for anyone listening, think that won't apply to business. Like, no. I am as successful as I am because of all the books I've read. You definitely can make money if you study, but you got to know what you want to do with it. So by the time I go to this, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be like insanely wealthy.
Yeah.
But my point is, because people, they kind of doubt that. They're like, oh, I don't learning, waste of time. No. It really isn't a waste of time.
Oh,
but John, my question is, sorry, I got so excited about this future.
I love that you're doing it. Yeah.
What was it like interacting with the professors?
Fantastic. You know why? They led to questions. You just said something that I just was going to come back to, which is, look, learning to open up your mind, even with, like I said, your own book, the books that we read, is invaluable in business and in everything, because it's your ability to know a broader, fuller landscape. If I just know media buying, if I just know television ratings, well, great. You can make a career out of being right. But if somebody asks you a question slightly out of the scope, then you're lost, defensive. It's like you want a breadth of knowledge, right? All the things you were talking about, you want a breadth of knowledge, because what it doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't validate who you are as a person. Well, what it did for me, it was an incredible rush, because I was appreciative of the knowledge. It makes you more confident. You said, how were the professors? They were freaking great. You know why? Because, and I learned this, I taught a course. I guest lectured a couple of years ago at Temple. And I don't, trust me, I don't tell you that to impress you, but what I was going to say was, the people that I was gravitating toward were the ones that expressed any interest at all. So imagine you're lecturing for 2 hours and you've got a bunch of people like, ugh, and they're playing on their phones, and what time is it? And they get somebody like you that's got questions, and I want to know, and can you show me more, and all that stuff. That's who you're going to feed off of, And so if they are the classic, don't question me, but I didn't really find that very much. I really didn't. I found it against of like a welcoming, inviting. That was just my experience. And I would wildly recommend it, because the stuff in business, the stuff in entrepreneur, in the world of entrepreneur, business, management.
Yeah, I don't believe I'm going to get to the highest possible level as a corporate cultural advisor, pundit, without the education. Now, there's a lot of ways to get education, but I've come to, I'm okay with admitting that I don't have the education I could.
You don't have
it's an interesting
all of
thing
the
that's
education,
happened.
right? You don't have all of the education that suits you. And that's a great thing to
Yeah.
have.
Oh, are you saying that that's more like subjective?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have, because I'm saying blatantly, I don't have it. So subjectively, I don't have the education that suits me.
So do you know what that makes it sound when you say that? Smart enough to say, I want more information because I don't know enough. Do you know what sounds narrow?
I feel humbled by, I really do. In the last 2 years, I've been humbled. I've been kind of broken down.
Why?
From, not in a negative way. I don't mean that. I don't mean that.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm gonna start crying. No, wait. Let's say that.
And I get hysterical laughing when you say it. Sorry.
Your message received. I can't wait to be a guest on that show in the next few.
Can't
weeks.
wait to have you.
And I can't. I'm gonna start crying.
Oh, please, yes, please, yes. Folks, we ran out of time.
What I mean by that is I feel humbled. I am hitting a limit. Personally, where it's like, I need to level up. I need to level up. What are your thoughts?
In order to do what?
Bigger risks.
Great. See what it's saying? That if you are hitting a wall
kind of brings us back to the beginning of the podcast.
Right. A negative mindset would be I'm hitting a wall, so there must be a problem, and the problem must be me, and it must be I'm not smart enough and I'm not capable of going forward. Time and experience and banging my head and mistakes and all that sort of thing, and kind people teaching me and exposing me and moving me in directions have shown me it's the opposite. So I have no problem admitting that I don't know enough. I have no problem telling people when I go through the training for my own course, so much of what I'm showing you is from other people. So when you're saying I want to know more because I want to take bigger risks, right? If I got you right,
Yeah,
right? It's
I
like,
mean, yeah,
so it's
I
like
want-
I'm saying I don't want to stay here. I don't want to stay here. And if I want to move forward, I have to know more. And you're not saying the only way I'm going to know more is by going to Villanova University and enrolling in the undergrad program. And you know what I mean? It's like, you'll figure that out. But what I found out was, did any of the education that I got make me a better general sales manager at the television station? I don't know that. But here's what it did. It made me smarter, period. It made me smart enough to ask more questions and better questions. And when you ask more questions, you know this, and better questions, well, then you're going to learn something really cool. And it might be in the linear direct field that you're in, and it might be in something else, and that might get you to ask another question. Think of all the guests that you've had on your podcast, Culture Math. Think of the myriad of people that you've had on in the number of fields they've been in. So I've heard enough of the episodes to know that you can go toe to toe with all of them without asking questions such as, so tell me a little bit about yourself, Brad. So what exactly do you do? Do you know what I mean?
I'm like cringing.
How many shows, how many podcasts have you listened to that began with, tell me a little bit about yourself?
All right, whoa, I gotta unpack this. What do you think about that non-question? That's not a question. Can you unpack it? What?
I'm sorry, I can unpack it all right. And I'm sorry, this will sound so
this is
judgy.
really helpful to everyone listening.
This will be it sounds so freaking judgy. I didn't mean to talk over you. I'm really sorry. But what I was gonna say is that it's like, I didn't bother to do any homework. So I'm going to say, Jay, I actually heard this on a podcast. I actually heard this. All right. So tell everybody what your name is and what do you do? I'm like, you don't know their name? Doesn't it just come up on the Zoom thing? It's Jay Doran? It's like, right. So what I'm saying is you've got the education. To me, I think what I learned when I finally finished was, you're very welcome. It's the fulfillment. It's the fulfillment and the appreciation. What are you going to do with the time? I had access to that same information when I was in my 20s, and then again in my 20s. And then I didn't go back until I was in my late 30s, right? So I had all that information, just basically let it squander. Bowling apparently was too important. Happy hour was too important. And just let it go, piss the money away, all that stuff. And I got back and I just became more fulfilled with that sense of learning, but that's also that sense of completion. So for you, I'd run to it. And I wouldn't put any timelines, run to it as long as it interests you. And when it doesn't interest you, just, okay, did it,
What has asking questions done to your life?
Makes me braver. Makes me braver. Makes me more compassionate. It makes me a better student. Makes me more empathetic. Makes me a better problem solver. That's just a few.
I'm laughing now because I didn't realize the time.
Oh, and by the way, I haven't even looked.
Well, I wouldn't have either, but an alarm went off. And I was like, I was trying to talk to you after this thing, catch up a bit. Gosh, the time flew by, my friend. If you were to put this into a theme for the listeners.
Okay.
I've been on this kick lately of trying to create a theme. I'm self speaking out loud because I realize I've been asking that a lot at the end recently. Curious for your thoughts on that, but we're out of time.
Yeah.
Next time, a theme for the episode. What if you were to condense it and then try to say something to the audience that you think they need to take away?
Remember when I was talking about earlier, and when I was like saying the theme that I use for like different is good? It's similar to what I'm saying here, because if you're thinking you're unusual and or different and or whatever, and that's a problem, then go to the trouble to include people and or learnings and or what have you. Use the education, all the stuff that we're talking about, use the experience and all that sort of thing to validate that. Validate, hopefully the conclusion for you is that you are different, you know, and that's to be celebrated. Like it's easy to tell somebody, oh, be more courageous. You would have had, you'd have had no shot. You know what I mean? Unless you literally threw me into a ring. The best way that you help somebody become more courageous, more brave, is just walk with them. Just find people, find circumstances, find the books, find the subjects, find the coaches, find the courses, find the people that would walk alongside of you. And they don't have to validate you and all that stuff like that. Yeah, like I said, find people to walk along with you. So like the phrase that from that book that you held up, my favorite line from that book of Alcoholics, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, has to do with the fact you never have to go it alone. I get choked up every time I hear that line. That conclude, you don't. You just don't. What you learn, what you experience, how you progress in business, the friends that you keep, the relationships that you have, all that sort of thing. No one's saying you can't go it alone. Of course, you know, but you don't have to. And it's like, embrace all of it. Take all of it along, you know? And lastly, steal from my Aunt Diane when she had a big buffet on the table, and I was a young kid at a holiday party, and I was like, all like, She's like, oh my God, take all of it. She said, she's like, you're probably gonna like most of it, and you know what I mean. And that's, to me, as I said again, is embrace all of it, and that's what I would just say: embrace as much as you can, and don't go it alone if you don't have to.
John,
yo.
I can't wait to come on.
I can't wait to have you, bro.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah, that's one thing I'm yearning to do more of this year.
Great.
For the listeners to listen to. I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and go on podcasts, and we could talk about why that would be uncomfortable for me when I come on the show. I'm excited.
I love that. Jay Doran, thanks so much for having me, man. As I said again, I get to relive the experiences. Just changes my mood, my spirit, makes me happy. So yeah,
this was fun. Hey, everyone listening, I can't wait to see you on the next episode. I challenge you to listen to this a few times, because I mean, John is unbelievably candorous, and we need more of that in our culture. And wow, I can't wait to have you back on, brother. And
be on in a heartbeat.
We will see you all soon. And thank you for listening to the Culture Matters podcast.